Hello and welcome to our TMH English Daily News with me, Deletna Dewalko. Melkam Ganna to everybody who celebrated the holidays over the weekend. I hope you guys enjoyed your holiday break. We're going back to our news for today. Headlines include a drone attack in Ethiopia's Tigrai region has killed over 56 people and injured 30 others, among those who were children as well, in a camp for displaced people. Government of Tigray says the international community has failed the people of Tigray in its entirety, and Eritrean military launches a fresh new attack in the northwestern Tigray region. A drone attack in Ethiopia's Tigray region has killed, as I said, 56 people and injured 30 others, amongst those who were children, in a camp for displaced people. Two aid workers on Saturday confirmed the attack to Reuters, citing local authorities, eyewitness accounts, and Timnit Bayru has more on this story.
The strike in the town of Dedebit in the northwestern region near the border with Eritrea occurred late on Friday night, said aid workers, who asked not to be named as they are not authorized to speak to the media. Member of the Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, said in a tweet, "Another callous drone attack by Abiy Ahmed in an IDP camp in Dedebit has claimed the lives of 56 innocent civilians so far." Both aid workers said the number of dead was confirmed by local authorities. The aid workers sent Reuters pictures that they said they had taken of the wounded in the hospital, who included many children. One of the aid workers who visited Shara Suhul General Hospital, where the injured were brought for treatment, said the injured told him the bombs came at midnight when it was completely dark and thus couldn't escape it. One of the aid workers said that one of the wounded in Friday's strike, Asafa Gabrahawaria, 75 years old, burst into tears as he recounted how his friend was killed. He was being treated for injuries to his left leg and hand. Fighting had forced Asafa out of his home, and now the airstrike had destroyed the camp, where even though he was facing hunger, at least he had shelter, he told the aid worker. He had arrived in the camp for displaced people from the border town of Humera. Member of the Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, said in a tweet, "Another callous drone by Abiy Ahmed in an IDP camp in Dedebit has claimed the lives of 56 innocent civilians so far." Before the latest strike, at least 146 people have been killed and 213 people injured in airstrikes in Tigray since October 18th. According to a document prepared by aid agencies and shared with Reuters this week. The Friday drone attack came on the heels of the Ethiopian government's claim to reconcile, freeing some opposition leaders. The Tigray Armed Forces expressed skepticism about Abiy's call for the national reconciliation. His daily routine of denying medication to helpless children and of sending drones targeting civilians flies in the face of his self-righteous claims. Getachew Reda, member of the Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, tweeted on Friday. The Ethiopian government is imposing total blockade on the region, leading to hunger and shortages of essentials like fuel and medicines.
Of drone attacks and airstrikes on continue, the government of Tigray says the international community has failed the people of Tigray as the genocidal Abiy Ahmed's regime commits mass murders with impunity. The government of Tigray made the remark in a press statement it released regarding the latest drone attacks on internally displaced persons. The statement stated that Abiy Ahmed regime will deliberately massacre civilians should not come as a surprise anymore, but what is shocking is the deafening international silence in the face of routine and brazen violence and violations of laws of armed conflict by the genocidal Abiy Ahmed regime. The statement said the international community has utterly failed the people of Tigray as the genocidal regime commits mass murder with impunity, and according to the statement, the people of Tigray are no longer interested in the international community's expression of concern that what they need are actions to compel what it called the criminal regime to respect elementary rules of armed conflict and hold it accountable for its violations on the laws of warfare. The government of Tigray said apparently dissatisfied with the pace of its slow-motion mass murder of the people of Tigray through starvation means, the Abiy regime has now resorted to raining aerial bombs on the innocent civilians. And since October 18th, the genocidal regime has stepped up its aerial bombardments of cities and towns across the entirety of Tigray, including the capital, Mekelle, far from the front lines. These indiscriminate aerial assaults have killed hundreds of people and wounded hundreds more. Abiy regime's latest drone attack just around midnight on the 8th of January in Dedebit, located in the northwestern part of Tigray, targeted an internally displaced persons camp, killing over 56 people and injuring 30 others, while wounding 100 others. The statement added that having escaped from a clutch of a marauding gang of genocidal forces in the western Tigray, these innocent Tigrayans were murdered while asleep on Christmas night. Hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans have been forcibly evicted from their homes in the western part of Tigray. Over 70,000 people have found refuge in Sudan, and thousands have been brutally murdered, and thousands are being kept in concentration camps under cruel, inhumane, and degrading conditions. IDPs and that the genocidal Abiy regime targeted in its latest bombardment of aerial violence are some of those that found sanctuary in the northern western Tigray are having been forcibly evicted from their homes as well, stated in the statement released. The Tigray Armed Forces accused Eritrean military of launching fresh attacks against its forces in northwestern Tigray, and the member of Tigray Armed Forces, Getachew Reda, wrote on his Twitter account that the Eritrean military fresh attacks against our forces yesterday, located in northwestern Tigray, close to Shararo town, shows that a statement of the government of Tigray also said that Eritrean forces attacked Aditzer, located close to town of Shararo, and the Eritrean military has been knee-deep in the genocidal war on Tigray since last year, November 2020, and the latest attack is an extension of its aggression against the people of the region. The offensive was followed by a drone attack on the IDPs that killed dozens of people and again wounded over 100 others. Eritrean Information Minister Yemane ገብረመስቀል did not immediately respond to Reuters' call to respond for comment. Aid agencies suspended work in the northwest Tigray after a deadly drone strike took place over the weekend. Aid agencies have suspended their work in the area of Ethiopia's Tigray region after a deadly drone attack on the camp for people displaced by the brutal war, the UN's Emergency Response Agency said on Sunday. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said in a statement to AFP that the attack at midnight Friday in a town of Dedebit in the northwestern Tigray had caused scores of civilian casualties, including deaths, according to the preliminary information. The statement specified that humanitarian partners suspended activities in the area due to the ongoing threats of the drone strikes. OSHA said that the lack of essential supplies, especially medical supplies and fuel, was severely disrupting the response to the injured and has led to the nearly total collapse of the health and the system in the Tigray region. The intensification of airstrikes is alarming, and once again, they remind all parties to conflict to respect their obligations under the international humanitarian law, is said. Critics say that the Ethiopian government's claim of extending an olive branch by releasing some of the political party prisoners just a publicity stunt. Timnit Bayru presents the story by Al Jazeera based on the analysis of Awal Allo, senior lecturer at Lock Hill University, and Jatil Tranvol, professor of conflict and peace studies at Oslo New University College.
Abiy Ahmed claimed that the release of political prisoners will pave the way for a national dialogue for lasting peace. The UN and EU have also welcomed the measure, but some government critics call the move a publicity stunt as the government has not shown commitment to a negotiated ceasefire. Criticism increased with the government's recent intensified drone attacks and airstrikes targeting civilians in Tigray and parts of Oromia. The latest government airstrikes killed at least 56 internally displaced people in western Tigray. Children were among the victims, according to aid workers. The airstrikes came a day after the pardons were announced, exposing the real intentions of the Ethiopian government. Awal Aulo, senior lecturer at law at Neil University, said primary responsibility lies with the government to pave conditions necessary for a credible and inclusive national dialogue process.
But the problem, of course, is that you still have significant number of individuals in prison, including leaders of the Oromo Liberation Front, which is a major political party in the Oromia region. We have still an armed conflict ongoing, including the drone attacks you just mentioned, a major humanitarian crisis, not just in Tigray. The situation in Tigray is unique, but in other regions as well, in Oromia, in Amhara, in the Afar region, you have a deepening polarization, which makes it very difficult for a national dialogue process to work. So primary responsibility lies with the government to create the conditions necessary for a credible, inclusive national dialogue process.
Kjetil Tronvoll, professor of conflict and peace studies at Oslo New University College, on his part, by excluding the Tigray Armed Forces and the Oromia Liberation Party, the Ethiopian government is not addressing the real problem, the civil war that is wreaking havoc in northern part of Ethiopia and western Oromia.
Attorney General Gedeon distinguished between two categories of released. The people belonging to the Oromo Federalist Congress and the Balderas were released due to help facilitate the political dialogue process moving forward. The prisoners belonging to the TPLF party were released due to their old age and health condition on a humanistic reasoning. So it is clear from the government side that they distinguish between the categories of prisoners released. And I think this is basically, as stressed, an indication of trying to facilitate a political dialogue in Ethiopia by including cherry-picking certain opposition parties they want to take part. Of course, the most significant ones are the release of Jawar Mohammed and Bekele Garba, the leadership of the Oromo Federalist Congress, which really pose a direct electoral threat to the current government. But this is not aimed at a peace negotiation process to the armed actors of TDF and OLA. And the government is sending out mixed signals in this regard. They are continuing their bombing, they're continuing the ground war, and they're continuing also very hostile rhetoric. If you read the recent couple of days statements by the Prime Minister's office. So we need to keep two topics in mind at the same time. Yes, it is positive that the government is aiming to, what can I say, broaden the democratic civil space in the country. But the real problem is the civil war, which is wreaking havoc in the northern parts of Ethiopia and in west in Oromia.
Both analysts said, taking Abiy Ahmed's track record, it is difficult to trust the prime minister, and that any credible dialogue should include all actors, especially the Tigray Armed Forces and the Oromo Liberation Army.
In the face of the very brutal and traumatizing experience that Ethiopia had over the last year and a half, and significant transformation in the political landscape, primarily because of the decisions that the Prime Minister has taken, it is very difficult at this point to trust the Prime Minister and his government. I mean, a national dialogue process in a country like Ethiopia, with a contested, very complex history, with contrasting visions of the future, where major political actors disagree on the kind of country and the kind of people that they want to be going forward, it is very difficult to see how a national dialogue process that is not genuine, that's not credible, that's not inclusive, would help solve this country's problem. Now, the government's public position so far is that those who are engaged in an armed conflict will not be part of the national dialogue process, namely the Tigray Defense Forces, the Oromo Liberation Army. These are groups with significant constituencies behind them. A national dialogue process that doesn't include these forces cannot be an inclusive national dialogue process. It cannot hope to solve Ethiopia's foundational, long-standing problem.
A national dialogue process to create a durable new political configuration, so to say, of Ethiopia need to include all parties. The parties which are really challenging the Ethiopian statehood, you can say, are the TDF and OLA today, and a number of other smaller armed groups. So they start in the wrong end. The peace negotiations need to take place first, or rather a cessation of hostilities agreement need to be on the table first, and then you can start to think about an all-inclusive political dialogue process moving forward. But as of today, the government still considers TDF, OLA, and the other fighting units as terrorist organizations, which they will not negotiate with. And so in that regard, a national dialogue will be mute, so to say, or not relevant to the key issues challenging Ethiopia, which is the civil war.
The U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, met Abiy Ahmed on Friday shortly before the pardons were announced. The analysts underlined that with many political prisoners stand behind bars and the exclusion of key actors, the planned national dialogue is likely to run into a dead end. The 14-month-old war that is still raging has created one of the most humanitarian crises in the world.
The Tigrayan diaspora in Germany call on all Germans, government, and the EU to take practical steps to help end the 433 days of the Tigray genocide. Members of the Tigrayan diaspora in Germany today gathered in front of the German chancellors in Berlin and asked the German government to put pressure on the governments and the companies selling drones and drone parts to the Abiy Ahmed regime to stop the indiscriminate killings of civilians. As you see, we have some footage of the demonstration. Let's listen to it live and we'll be back with more. Amongst their call for help, they also called for the end of the humanitarian blockade, which has led to man-made famine and starvation of millions of people, including children. Members of the Oromo community in Germans who participated in the demonstration also expressed their solidarity with the people of Tigray, voicing their call to the German government to help end the war in the country of Ethiopia. The demonstrations called on the international community to back their call for the withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigray with action as soon as possible. And the demonstrators also submitted the written appeal to the German Chancellor's office. President Biden expressed concern that the ongoing hostilities in Ethiopia, including recent airstrikes, continue to cause civilian casualties and suffering. A readout of President Biden's call with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed today indicated that Biden reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to work alongside the African Union and regional partners towards the peaceful resolution of the conflict. The two leaders also discussed ways to accelerate dialogue toward a negotiated ceasefire and the urgency of improving humanitarian access across Ethiopia and the need to address the human rights concerns of all affected Ethiopians, including concerns about detentions of Ethiopians under the state of emergency solely on their identity alone. Both leaders underscored the need for Congress to progress and to resolve the ongoing conflict in Ethiopia as soon as possible. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.